Welcome back, mental magicians. Blavatsky has said of Kriyāśakti, it is the mysterious power of thought which enables it to produce external, perceptible, phenomenal results by its own inherent energy. The ancients held that any idea will manifest itself externally if one's attention, our will, is deeply concentrated upon it. Similarly, an intense volition, which means a using of our will be followed by a desired result. A yogi generally performs his wonders by means of Iccha-shakti, and that's willpower, and Kriyashakti, thought power. That's from The Secret Doctrine. I also wish to address about the term desire that Atkinson uses. I completely understand where you're coming from. Desire leads to attachment, which leads to suffering. But here in this course, what I'm trying to get at here is that desire does not mean so much selfish obsession, but is merely an intention for action, any action, and it's fleshed out with feelings. So when we say the word desire, it is intention from which all creation is based. All creation came from an intention, from the consciousness. There are also the powerful lessons here on Living Theosophy of the Unfolding Consciousness book study series, where we are currently covering the divine forces in the human being. It's all about what we're talking about here and the awakening of our latent powers and faculties of consciousness, okay? So Perennial Philosophy's explanation and investigation of the unexplained laws of nature and the powers that are latent, meaning dormant, in mankind, in each and every one of us. Remember to do no harm. Do no harm. Do not use this to take something that belongs to somebody else. Other than that, you can have the life that you want. You can create it and manifest it. So last week, we left off with waves of feelings. So let's get to it. We're in the underlying force, and now we're in mentative cyclones. Mentative cyclones. You've experienced these. These are very common and give you a clue to the apparent mystery of the forming of and the action of mobs, a group of people composed of a number of individuals who combine in numbers, then commit acts that no one man would ever think of, ever. The conscience of the mob is apparently a thing apart from the individual consciences of the units composing it. After all of the excitement and all the drama, the morning after, many, if not all, the people of the mob may feel a sickening horror and cannot believe what took place. A mob is a cyclonic center of mentative currents, resembling a whirlpool or a whirlwind, with an active center and a less active circumference. Great waves of religious fervor, noticeable in communities during revivals and things like that, are accounted for in the same way. A few active revivalists start a whirlwind of intense feeling and emotion, and it spreads out, you've been there, in constantly widening circles, increasing until a climax is reached, and then, with diminishing strength, it gradually settles down into the accustomed mental state of the community. Now, these whirlwinds of emotional excitement, or whatever you want to call them, they are strengthened by the constantly repeated suggestions of those participating in it, which, with the constantly growing volume of mentative energy being thrown forth, adds fuel to the fire. This force would go on forever, steadily gaining in strength and volume were it not for a provision of nature, which causes the law of rise and fall, increase and decrease. What goes up must come down. It's the universal law of rhythm. Everything is cyclical. Everything is cyclical. So the universal law of rhythm manifests in this as in all else in her domain. Everything has its climax and its decline. Everything. So much for these general waves of mentative energy or mentative currents, but there is another phase to be considered, many phases. Atkinson says, let's take a look. The centers of the mental whirlpools, all right? What's causing all of this? There are mentative currents arising from strong centered desire of one person who, forming a strong mental image, all right, by means of visualization, creates for himself a center of desire force, which, guided by his willpower, attracts to him that which will fit into his plans. He constitutes himself a mentative center around his visualized idea and constantly sends out strong mentative currents with the strongest, most ardent thought force, guided, directed, projected by his developed willpower. He thus sets into operation the great mental law of attraction, which, remember, this is written 120 years ago. It's now commonly known. And back then, Atkinson says the early writers on mental science like to talk so much about it. It's a very real thing, and it needs to be used responsibly. These mentative currents charged with desire spread out and soon began a rotary movement, like a whirlpool, sweeping around and around, always drawing in towards its center, persons and things tending to fit with the plans of the center. The original desire in the man's mind is reproduced in kind in the minds of thousands of people by the law of mentative induction, and they all fall into plan. The degree, of course, depending upon the degree of positivity or negativity of the receptive mind, multiplied by the degree of positivity, proactive positivity, by the originator. The great plans of the so-called captains of industry are carried out by reason of this law. Many of the great centers of desire force, these successful men who attracted to them that which they desired and that they wanted, and those whom they need, do not realize the nature of the force that they are using. But there is a constantly increasing number who do know it, and they are working it for all it's worth. They're using it right now. Many of these steady, cool business leaders are really deeply versed in these occult laws. That's why I'm trying to teach you about them. If the true facts were to creep out, there would be the greatest sensation the country has ever known, Atkinson says. Mentative influence. Then there is still another phase of the matter, and Atkinson is alluding to the cases of men and women who generally, consciously, but sometimes unconsciously, are focusing their mentative currents currently upon some person or persons who are necessary to their plans and desires. They are filled with desire to have these persons do this and do that, or don't do this and don't do that, as is the case may be. These people, according to their degree of concentration and their willpower, direct to the other person or persons strong mentative currents of desire force and mentative induction set up. They set up vibrations of a corresponding rate in the minds of these other people. The degree of the effect produced, of course, depending upon the degree of negativity in the recipient. This effect goes both ways, both according to the law of mentative induction. The first way is to set up the corresponding desire vibrations in the mind of the other people so that it will in turn cause your will to carry out the desire. Stay with me here. A variation of this is to direct the desire force toward the will of the other and thus entice or charm the other's will into compliance with the desire of the sender. This will be understood if you remember what Atkinson has said about the resemblance of the desire pole, all right, masculine and feminine, all right, the will pole to the masculine and the feminine. You will see a demonstration of this at every point of mentative influence. Now, I am interjecting this here. I wish to reiterate that the whole point of sharing these teachings with you is to hopefully get them out into the world where they will be used wisely, unselfishly, for the best interest of all beings, and to protect yourself, as there are many people who are currently using this ability for very negative, horrific, and selfish reasons. Okay, some more about mentative influence. The second way is for the will of the sender to force its way past the will of the other and boldly make love, he writes, to the desire of the other and endeavor to seduce it by mere strength and persistency until it accedes to his wishes. The variation of this is seen in the case where the attacking will, all right, boldly just tackles the will of the other, and by sheer superiority and strength of power, it overcomes and makes it captive and obedient. This latter is very rare, he says, except in cases of personal interactions between two people aided by telepathy between interaction. You will also notice that the phase in which the desire pole of the mentator does the work is along the lines of the feminine action, the force of being charming, fascinating, receptive in nature. And where the will is employed, the action is decidedly masculine, all right? The approach being made boldly, strong, and sure. the subtlety of the desire attraction being absent. The giants in the art of meditative attraction combine the poles in their approaches. He uses the word attacks here, and they catch them coming and they catch them going. So next week we cover personal influence. Now I know I tell you this all the time, I do, but with The Secret and the absolute ocean of law of attraction videos here on YouTube, I remind you, please, I am sharing these teachings with you, trusting that you're going to do the right things with them. You're going to use them responsibly and for the benefit of all beings on this planet. That is what they are to be used for. Remember, do no harm, cause no suffering, please, and do not use this to take something that belongs to somebody else, and that includes your ex. Okay? All right, the brain can transform energy into physical substances and states. I also want to say you'll notice that Atkinson can get very repetitive in these lessons, and that's okay. That's to hammer it home. And also, just remember, when you're trying to create something or use this law of attraction, mentative energy, our will is strong at first, and then we kind of peter out, and it gets calm, and we're like, yeah, whatever. If it happens, blah, blah, blah. He's teaching us how to use this ancient law and use it for good. All right, remember on the Sunday night, twice a month now, consciousness series on unfolding consciousness, we are currently covering the intelligent powers in nature and humans, which is the investigation of the unexplained laws or hidden mysteries of nature and the psychic powers that are available in all of us. So we just did one on the pineal gland and the third eye. The third eye was actually, it's not in the middle up here, it's back here in the middle. Anyway, if you want to learn about that and so much more, check out all that we have here on the Living Theosophy channel. And I love you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. We'll be doing these fortnightly.